Welcome to the course on behavior modification, brought to you by allceus.com. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to be vocabulary, behavior modification basics. One of the first things we have to understand is what behavior is. Behavior is observable and measurable. Observable means that we can see it in one way, shape, or form. We can see a change on a graph. There's something we can count. It's not something that's sort of loosey-goosey out there. Now, we'll talk about some ways that you can use Likert scales and a rating from 1 to 5 in order to make things a little bit more measurable, which tend to be less observable. A lot of your true behaviorists will say a behavior must be able to be seen or it doesn't exist. Thoughts and cognitions, not interested. So behavior is measurable in terms of frequency, intensity, and duration. Frequency is how often it occurs. Intensity is how strongly it occurs. And duration is for how long it occurs. Behaviors, rewards, and punishments can all vary in measurable amounts. So let's apply this to some of the following behaviors. Substance use. Frequency of substance use can be how much a person drinks in a week or how many drinks they drink in an hour. Intensity can be the strength of the alcohol or drug that they're using. And duration can be for how long do they use at a stint. Do they use for an hour? Do they go on a week-long bender? What is it? For binge eating, the frequency would be how often do you do it? Every day? Once a week? When you do it, how many calories do you consume within an hour? And duration is how long does your average binge last? Is it an hour, 2 hours, from the time you finish dinner until you pass out? Exercising frequency. Now this can be different for different people. You can say how many times do you exercise in a week, or how many repetitions do you do in a set or in a minute. Intensity is how hard you're working. How heavy are the weights? Or how quickly are you sprinting? And duration is how long it lasts. When you exercise, do you exercise for an hour or for 45 minutes? When you're doing weightlifting exercises, is the duration 8 repetitions or 30 seconds? Temper tantrums. This is a common one we measure. Frequency. How often does it occur? Is this a daily thing? Is this every time we go to the grocery store thing? How bad is it? Is it just the annoying mommy please, or is it an all-out throw yourself on the ground, kick your feet, and bang your fists temper tantrum? And how long does each temper tantrum last? 5 seconds, 30 seconds? It doesn't ever seem to end. These are some examples that you can use to try to figure out how you would measure frequency, intensity, and duration. Now that we've talked about frequency, intensity, and duration, we're going to talk about baseline and charting. When you're wanting to change a behavior, again, we're going to make it observable, so we need to chart the frequency, intensity, and duration. Some people choose to just monitor one of those. The frequency is usually the most common. Each behavior occurs at a baseline. This is how often or how intense or for how long the behavior occurs before you apply any interventions. You want to chart the baseline for a week. If you're going to do a combination of frequency, intensity, and or duration, use different colors when you plot it. Along the x-axis, the one that goes across, identify how often you measure in days, hours, class periods, sets, whatever. Along the y-axis, you'll increase in increments of 1. That way, when you're measuring intensity, for example, if you're talking about temper tantrums, on a scale of 1 to 10, you can identify how intense the behavior was. Frequency, you can identify how often the behavior occurred for each time period. So if you're monitoring in days, how many temper tantrums occurred that day. And then for duration, you're going to take, if maybe there were 3 temper tantrums, you're going to average the time for all 3 of those temper tantrums to identify a duration, an average duration of the temper tantrums for the day. Once you have your baseline, you know how often it occurs, then you want to figure out what's maintaining it. Reinforcement or rewards increase the likelihood that something's going to happen again. There are 2 types of reinforcement. Positive means giving somebody something positive, such as money or candy or even just a big hug. Negative reinforcement means taking away something negative, such as eating your vegetables or cleaning your room. Punishment, on the other hand, can also be positive or negative, but involves doing things that will reduce the likelihood that something's going to occur. Positive punishment means providing something punishing, such as a spanking. Negative punishment means removing something rewarding, such as 30 minutes of video games, or time to play with your favorite toy, or going over to your friend's house, or the car keys. It's important to remember that there are a lot of different reinforcers maintaining a behavior. The ones that we intentionally put in the environment are easily controllable. But then there are others that are just kind of there that we have to deal with. There are some reinforcers that are unconditioned. That means they're reinforcing just by their very nature, which is why, for example, lab rats respond so well to food, cocaine, and sex. All of those things alter chemicals in the brain and or meet a biological need. Other things that tend to be unconditioned sources of reinforcement include power and removal of pain. We don't like to be in pain, so that's really reinforcing. If you stop doing this, then I'll do whatever you want me to do. And power is one of those things that's a reinforcer in primitive species such as lions and tigers and bears, oh my. But it's also prevalent in humans. And then you have your conditioned or learned reinforcers, such as money. You take a dollar bill or $100 bill into the middle of the rainforest and hand it to somebody, they're going to look at you like you lost your mind. They don't operate with that type of currency. So all that is a piece of paper with some green ink on it. Jewelry is also something that's a conditioned reinforcer. Now, there are a lot more places around the world that use precious metals as currency. But in and of themselves, if we hadn't set up that system, precious metals themselves are just a hunk of metal. We have given them value by making them something people want. Identify the potential reinforcers in the following scenarios. You're speeding. What rewards that behavior? It's fun. It's an adrenaline rush. Gives you a sense of power and control because you're getting away with something. And it probably gets you to your destination faster. So it rewards that need for immediate gratification. Eating is reinforcing because it tastes good. It fulfills a biological need. And it tastes good. Breaking the rules is reinforcing because it gives you a sense of power. It often gets you something else that you want. You're breaking the rules for a reason. So it's a means to an end. Creating chaos is often reinforcing because it throws the focus off you. It can be amusing to watch. In the residential programs that I manage, this is one of our biggest bugaboos. People are more addicted to creating chaos than just about anything else that they're allowed to have in the facility. The drama that goes with it, they feed off the energy from the drama. They also feed off the ability of chaos to throw focus from them so they can get away with something else that they want. That whole means to an end thing again. So you've got to figure out, why is this person breaking the rules or creating chaos? What's the ultimate goal? That's your reinforcer. And being impulsive. Being impulsive can be rewarding because it gets us what we want, whatever that ultimate reward is, when we want it, without necessarily regard for consequences. When behaviors are reinforced, it increases the likelihood that they'll reoccur. The stronger the reinforcement, the harder it will be to change the bad behavior. If you do something and maybe somebody gives you $10 for it, you might think about it before you do it again because, $10 doesn't go very far anymore. But if you do something and somebody gives you $10,000 for it, as long as it didn't require too much effort, that's probably a no-brainer. You're going to do it again. For those same things that we talked about reinforcers above, let's talk about possible punishments. Speeding. Possible punishments are getting caught, getting in trouble, which means you lose power, and having to pay a fine, which means you're having to take your money and give it to somebody else. Possible punishments for eating. If you eat too fast or eat too much, you can get a bellyache. You can gain weight. You can get sick. Breaking the rules and creating chaos and being impulsive all kind of have similar punishments in that you may not get what you want. It may cost more in effort, time, or resources than it was worth. It may get you caught and punished by some other external body, just like speeding. So what is going to keep people from breaking the rules? One of the things that we've found is that if we provide enough positive behaviors that are counter to the negative behavior, people won't do it. If they would rather do a good thing than do a bad thing, then we're better off. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that there are other enticing behaviors out there that meet the same need. When behaviors are punished instead of rewarded, it decreases the likelihood they'll reoccur. The stronger the punishment, the more likely the behavior will go away. Now, for example, binge eating. Let's talk about that. A lot of us have had those days where we've just had a really bad day and we crawl into a bubble bath with a pint of Haagen-Dazs. Now, rewarding? At the moment, yeah, because it tastes good, makes us forget. Now, possible punishments could be the weight gain. Well, that's about the only one I'm seeing for that one. So you want to focus on providing alternatives for that behavior. If you're concerned about the weight gain, what are some other behaviors that you might be able to engage in that will be equally reinforcing as a pint of Haagen-Dazs and a bubble bath? Identify 3 reinforcers for the following people in your life. A child who is doing his homework, a patient who has anger management issues, and a spouse who helps out with household chores. In order to change behavior, it must be punished, or at least not rewarded, at least 3 times for every time it was rewarded. So if you rewarded a temper tantrum 5 times by letting the child have the candy or the toy or whatever he wanted, then you're going to have to punish it 15 times in order for him to figure out that it ain't worth the effort anymore. Discriminative stimuli can prompt people to engage in behaviors. So if you want to change your behavior, then you need to set up prompts in the environment that say, don't do this instead. For example, I have a really bad habit of eating. The first thing I do when I walk in the door is like I walk in, put down my bag, and go eat. Well, I don't want to do that anymore. And I've had this urge to do that or this habit or whatever you say for a long time. So it's going to take a while of doing other things before that habit goes away. So I need to put discriminative stimuli or prompts in the environment that remind me to not come in and just start grazing, because then I ruin my dinner. Before a behavior is extinguished, the person will often demonstrate an extinction burst. Prime example of this is the child who doesn't get candy when he wants it, starts to throw his temper tantrum, starts out with, please, please, I really want it, please, but Mommy, and gets progressively loud and obnoxious and embarrassing. Now at a certain point, he's usually going to realize that it's causing more effort than it's worth, and he'll give it up, or he'll just get tired. Surviving the extinction burst is the challenge. When I was in college, I had the opportunity, if you want to say it, to do a lab in which we all had pigeons, and we had to train our pigeons to do something. My group decided to train our pigeon to hokey pokey. And you're sitting there to yourself going, she taught a pigeon to hokey pokey. Yes, I did, and he was a very cute little guy too. But we used the extinction burst to reward behaviors, because he'd start putting out all of these different behaviors. He's like, something like this is going to get me food. And he starts basically freaking out. And then when he does something that was similar to what we wanted him to do, we would let him have the treat. We'll talk about that more with shaping. Suffice it for now just to try to figure out how we had a pigeon hokey pokeying. Before behaviors can effectively be eliminated, the person must have a replacement. The replacement must be equally rewarding or satisfy the same need. You're not going to go on a diet, eliminate all the chocolate and pizza and beer from your diet, and decide to drink water and eat celery. You're not going to stay on that diet for very long. You want to replace it with something that's equally rewarding. So identify the reasons you're eating the chocolate to help identify reasonable alternatives. Are you eating too much chocolate because you just sit down with the whole 1-pound bag of M&Ms and kind of lose track of what you're doing? Well, the alternative would be get the smaller bags or put them in a dish. Are you eating chocolate because it's a self-soothing thing? Well, what else can you do to self-soothe? What other alternatives are out there to replace some of your unhealthy habits? Application. Identify 3 discriminative stimuli for 3 of your habits. So, for example, if you have the bad habit of leaving your clothes on the floor of the bathroom and you want to remember to put them in the hamper, then you can move the hamper into the bathroom. That's usually a good discriminative stimuli if it's right there. Good place to start. And then you can move it out. So then you'll be looking for that hamper in the bathroom to put your clothes in, and all of a sudden you'll go, oh, it's out in my closet. And you'll walk out into the closet. Discriminative stimuli for exercising. Put your gym bag in your car. And don't go home first. Because most of us, when we go home after a long day's work and we eat dinner, we're not going back out to the gym. So put the discriminative stimuli right there. Some people before bathing suit season will get their new bathing suit and hang it up in their closet so they see it every day and they go, I want to be in shape for that. We also want to identify alternative behaviors. So if we bite our nails when we get stressed, what else could we do when we get stressed instead of biting our nails? Because just stopping biting our nails does not relieve the stress. You can get a worry stone, and generally that's a good thing to start out with. I used to have a USB drive that was attached to my keychain that I would flick in and out, and in and out, and in and out, and in and out. Those things aren't made to do that. That was my own personal little worry stone. Unfortunately, since it wasn't made for that, I eventually broke it. Not a suggestion that you should follow. But you can get little river rocks that have been polished that are actually made for that. Alternative behaviors to biting your nails. Write a letter. Get up and start cleaning. Take up a hobby that uses your hands, such as knitting. Chew on gum. If you're chewing on gum, you're less likely to chew on your nails. Identify discriminative stimuli for those behaviors. Chewing gum. If you have the packet of gum right there, you're going to remember to do it. If you've taken up knitting, have the knitting needles by the chair that you sit at. If you have a worry stone, keep it in your pocket all the time. That way you can reach in and grab it whenever you get stressed. A little about consistency. Behaviors that are reinforced on a variable ratio schedule are the hardest to extinguish. If you give in to a tantrum sometimes, then that means the child holds out this hope that, okay, maybe this time they'll give in. Maybe this time they'll give in. Initial rewards must be frequent and intense to avoid behavior strain. If you're trying to change a behavior, you need to reward that behavior rapidly and strongly, not just wait for the end of the week, especially with children. Children need to have behaviors rewarded almost immediately. Waiting till the end of the week or the end of the month is too long for that reward to do any good. One way you can stave off rewards would be by creating a token economy. So when a child does something well, they get a token, and then they can cash in their tokens at the end of the week for a larger prize. Behavior strain is when the cost-benefit is almost equal or the cost exceeds the benefit. So if it requires too much energy, you're not going to do it. Schedules of reinforcement are fixed or variable. Fixed means they occur at the same time or after the same number of instances. Fixed ratio produces a high, steady rate of behavior. If you get a reward after you wrap every 5 presents, then you're going to wrap presents like a maniac. You're going to wrap 5, get a reward, wrap 5, get a reward, see how many you can get wrapped to get rewards. But as soon as the reinforcer is gone, you wrap 5 and you don't get a reward, they're going to be like, huh? Do it again, you're going to be like, huh? You're probably not going to do it a 3rd time. Fixed interval produces a slow, steady rate of behavior. These are the people that are paid salary. That means they're paid every 2 weeks. They just kind of have to show up. Again, this extinguishes quickly once the reinforcer is gone. You show up for your 2 weeks and you don't get a paycheck, you're not going to be real likely to return. Variable ratio produces a high, steady rate of behavior, and it's the slowest to extinguish. This is like pulling a number out of a hat and saying, okay, every 3rd time you do something, you'll get a reward. Every 5th time you do something, you're going to get a reward. Oops, you just have to do it once now and you get a reward. Variable ratio is the schedule of reinforcement that the lottery is on. The scratch-off tickets, you have, sometimes you may scratch off 2 in a row and win $15 each time. So you're more likely to do it again And you may have to scratch off 20 before you get a reward the next time. But you remember that you got 2 in a row at once, so you might get 2 in a row again. Variable interval produces a slow, steady rate of behavior. It's not dependent on how many pieces, how many things you get wrapped, how many things you do. It's just sometimes you'll get a reward after an hour. Sometimes it'll be 6 hours. Sometimes it'll be 2 hours. You never really know. You just kind of have to hang around and find out. And it extinguishes quickly once the reinforcer is gone. Now, oftentimes we need to shape behaviors. Now, with humans, as opposed to pigeons, we can generally tell them, you will get a reward if you do this. And they get it. And you have to set it up and you reward the behavior. One of the things you may have to shape, for example, getting a child to clean his room. First, you provide the reward even if you have to put up a chore chart and prompt him 3 times on exactly what needs to be done in order for the room to be clean. After he gets the hang of that for a while, and he's getting his room clean, you figured out that he understands, then he has to get his room cleaned with only 1 prompt to go do it. Eventually, you want to shape that behavior so the child knows that every evening after dinner they're supposed to go clean their room, and you don't have to tell them. The rewards can be on a fixed interval or ratio, but you need to make sure that the rewards are provided so the child says, oh, if I clean my room, I'll get a reward. Once the child has accomplished it, they're cleaning their room with no more than 3 prompts on how to get it clean. They get the reward. You say, all right, that's too easy now. Now you're not going to get the reward unless you get it clean without more than 1 prompt. When they do that easily, you eliminate the reward and say, okay, now the only way you're going to get the reward is if you remember to go clean your room on your own. As the behavior starts to be strained, the person will exhibit an extinction burst. If they're not getting rewards enough for cleaning their room, theoretically, they'll try to do a little bit better of a job cleaning their room. Now, in the example of the pigeon, he didn't know what he was supposed to do. He was a pigeon. But he went in there, and he learned that if he pecked this thing, food would drop out. So he pecked it, and food would drop out. Well, then after a little while, we set it up so when he pecked it, food didn't drop out. And he got very angry. When he got angry, eventually, he started moving around and putting his wings in. And when he would turn, so his right wing would face the food tray, we would let food drop, and he'd eat. And over time, he learned that if he turned and his right wing faced the food drop, he got food. So he was putting his right wing in. And then after a while, he had to put his right wing in, and then he had to turn and face the food again. So he was putting his right wing out. Then he got his treat. You see how this went, and yes, it lasted an entire semester, and it was very long and arduous. But by the end, he could put his right wing in, he could put his right wing out, put his right wing in, and flap it all about. Yeah, I actually paid for that class. So there are lots of other examples. We've already talked about the cleaning the room example. Other techniques for increasing the frequency of a behavior is to pair the behavior with something the person likes. When I was taking calculus in college, I hated it. I hated doing calculus homework. So I would get almond M&Ms, and I would eat those while I did my homework. That was the only time I got my almond M&Ms. Unfortunately, my husband heard me do this recording, and he has since started plying me with almond M&Ms, so I actually focus on my work. Competing responses. These are things that you can't do and do the target behavior at the same time. If you want to stop smoking, generally you're not going to smoke and go out on a jog at the same time. You're not going to smoke and chew gum at the same time. That one's kind of iffy. But most people aren't going to smoke while they are, well, maybe they would while they're taking a bath. But find things that are competing. One of the other habits that I have is I will snack while I'm cooking, which again ruins my dinner. So if you want to look at the competing behaviors which might exist, if you're not wanting to snack on food, put gum in your mouth. If you're chewing gum, then you're not going to want to be sampling everything else that you're cooking. Call a friend. If you're talking on the phone, you're not going to want to be eating. There are other things that you could probably do, but those are the two that come to mind right offhand. In summary, behavior modification is a tool that can be used in treatment. Understanding why certain people, places, activities, and substances are reinforcing can help identify alternate behaviors. Conditioned reinforcers are things that have no intrinsic reinforcing value, but are associated with reinforcers. People need to learn how to identify what is reinforcing to them. And it's important to remember that oftentimes reinforcement and punishment must occur immediately after the behavior to be most effective.